effort does not equal impact. The hustle mentality is not always a winning strategy. Just because you can create a lot of content, that does not always guarantee growth. Let's dive into some winning strategies that actually do.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast presented by vidIQ. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yep, we get it. We are here today to help you change that.
Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's great to see you again here for another Video Creators Podcast episode brought to you by vidIQ, like we do every Monday for you. I'm just hanging out, sharing more advanced growth tips and tactics, next level strategies, growing our business, helping you reach more people and change their lives. And I'm doing that today with Sam and Blake, two of the YouTube strategists here on the team. Guys, guess what?
What?
All right. This has been a little bit of a saga. We have a marble table out in our patio. You know that my patio I have turned into a complete floral oasis. I have spent a lot of time, energy, and quite honestly, a lot of money out there over the last several years. And we've had this beautiful marble table, and I've really wanted to fix it. I YouTube searched several videos of how to repair it because I have so many of the marble, like custom made tiles falling off. And I saw so many great YouTube videos. My husband told me, he's like, you can't fix that. I really wanted to prove him wrong. I know. I really wanted to prove him wrong. It was kind of like one of those things like we tell Tim, I don't know if you can't
do this, but
yeah, you can't do this. Yeah.
It's really a challenge.
It is. I really want to prove him wrong. My brother's even coming out, and I thought this would be the perfect project for him and I to do because I have all the pieces. But he decided to order a new granite table instead. So he had somebody custom make just a granite top and glued it onto the bottoms. I'm a little hurt. I know. I thought like it could be good YouTube content.
I know. I was going to say. Film a whole story video around that.
I know. Instead, we're just going to talk about YouTube strategy today in its place. I thought that we would kind of have a deeper discussion about something that we talk about literally all the time, experimenting. So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on why even experiment with content in the first place.
Yeah, well, I feel like a lot of creators that we end up working with have been creating for a long time, and they get to this point where it just feels exhausting, either feeling like we're on this hamster wheel, we've just been doing the same thing for years, things are just kind of stagnant, frustrated, like how do I break out of this? How do I grow my channel and reach people again? And usually there's like a point in time earlier on that they can point to of, well, here, I was getting a lot of views and a lot of new subscribers and just growing the channel a lot. And I'm just not experiencing that anymore. And so I think, really with experimenting well, like how do we do that well? It's kind of like a scary thing. It's a scary thing for creators because it's like on one hand, we don't want to abandon what we've been doing and maybe like break our channel, but we also don't want to, go super crazy because like time is a thing too. Like, how much time is this going to take? How much brain power? I think there's just a lot of question marks there. So that's kind of what I've seen in creators that I've worked with, but I'm curious about you guys.
I'm curious, Sam, because you said break your channel, and I personally don't think you can break your channel.
I agree with that. That's actually one of the first things I usually tell them, not to be afraid of that, because I think that's the biggest fear. If I try something new, is it going to ruin everything that I've built?
Yeah. What about you, Blake?
There's even, I was thinking about one of the coaches on the team here working with the clients, and the idea of creating a channel that's sustainable to maintain for a long period of time. Like, how do I do something? Like, YouTube's a marathon, and it can be a long-term career for a lot of people. But if we're on a path of like burnout, which the one coach I'm talking about, the creator he's working with, is heading in that direction, posting like 15, 16 videos a week, and he's feeling the burnout. He's aware of that. He wants to kind of get out of this, but the fear for him is also the same thing. I'm afraid of doing damage to my channel. But the idea of like, experimentation is going to be the way of breaking that cycle so that we can create something a little bit more sustainable and create growth instead of having to make so many videos all the time, but make it in kind of tone back and still see that growth and give yourself the space to breathe that you're looking for. So for some people, it's just sustainability for the long haul of the game.
It's funny because I got anxiety just by you even saying that. I cannot even put wrap my mind around making 16 videos a week, not even shorts, videos a week. That's crazy. Yeah. So let's turn this into somewhat of a practical conversation here. So how, you have somebody who's listening here in the audience, and, they kind of understand why we might want to experiment in the first place, but that's all theory. How do you actually run experiments? Where do you start?
That's a really good question. And I feel like there's some nuance there, because I think it depends on where the creator's at. Because I think you can kind of fall on either side of the coin, where maybe you're uploading 15 to 16 uploads a week and you're kind of in this more is better mindset of like, if I'm going to grow, I just got to put more content out, right? And that's just, you burn out even more. I think on the other side of the coin, there's also creators we work with that are so afraid to start that they just have total analysis paralysis. And it's, I can't put a video out until it's perfect, or until I make it the best video ever. And at that point, you're also kind of stuck in this rut too, because you just can't get any momentum if it's just taking you too long. So that's kind of the first place where I would start, as far as where are we at right now and what do we need to do to begin experimenting to kind of push us in the right direction.
So let's approach it from both perspectives, because I think what you're saying is very valuable. And if I'm going to take the latter perspective, right, somebody who's in that analysis paralysis part, I think, one of the things that I always coach around, it's the same thing in art, right? The blank canvas, and all you do is you stare at it and it just becomes almost mind numbing, like you can't even see through it. So what a lot of artists do is they just make a mark. That way it breaks it. So when it comes to YouTube content, that can look a couple different ways. It could be you shooting a video, not necessarily for the purpose of publishing it, right? It's just a matter of getting back into the habit of pressing record, right? Or maybe if it's long form content that you usually do and you just can't quite get there, maybe you put out a short, something that's a little bit of a lighter lift and doesn't maybe have as high a stakes to it for you. What do you think? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think too, it could help to look at some of your analytics and see, like, if you already have a library of content, but you're experiencing this analysis paralysis because you're trying to make, it's like, I know my past content isn't good. I'm trying to make my next video perfect and as best as it can be, but I just can't get myself there to actually get it out. I think it could help to look in your analytics and try to identify maybe what is the biggest domino that we could knock over first. Like, is there a glaring thing that we could really improve that maybe is the biggest opportunity for improvement? Like, maybe the video structure is pretty good generally, but our titles and thumbnails really need some work. That could give you like one step forward as an actionable experiment of, maybe let's not try to just tackle the entire picture right now. Like, can we just start with our titles and thumbnails and run an experiment and try to improve those for the next 5 to 10 uploads? And then from there, kind of see where we're at. Then maybe we start to include the opening hook. Then what's the next step and the next step?
I was thinking that too, like the idea of which viewer signal are we stuck on right now? So if it's the viewer signal of, are they clicking? That's when your first approach is. Are they watching the content? Cool, let's experiment there. Are they watching more content? Cool. Is our call to action strong enough? But depending on what the goal is, what viewer signal are we stuck on? Maybe we can focus on one at a time. I'd even say too, kind of taking a little bit of a step back, but sometimes I even think maybe not 16 videos a week, but sometimes posting more videos can also be an experimentation in itself, especially for a newer channel. Like, at that point, you don't know what you don't know. The only way to get that information is to create a bunch of content, and whether that be I'm not saying 16 videos, but more than usual to kind of get your reps out there. That's great for experimentation as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Ingrid, you said this a couple times, like, YouTube is very much a fail forward experience. Mm-hmm. And I think it is important with that to also say in tandem, like, you can't break your channel. So failing does not mean the channel is ruined and you won't ever grow this thing. But instead to look at failure, quote unquote, as these are just more areas of improvement. But if you're failing forward, you're constantly going to be making progress and moving forward, not stuck.
So somewhere Tim is like smiling because he knows we're putting
We're air quoting.
we're air quoting around something for you, Tim. Yeah. Failure, I think, is a word that every YouTuber should learn to embrace because it doesn't have a negative connotation to it. It's actually another word for rep. Because I think that in every single experiment, think about, the greats, right? Bell, Edison, they didn't invent their things on the first thing. They invented them on like the 1,000th try, literally. So what makes you think you're going to get it on the first?
Gosh, even YouTube itself. YouTube was a dating site when it first launched.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So that was an experimentation process to begin with.
All the fails of the algorithms and how they needed to tweak it over and over and over the years. I mean, everything is a constant experiment. It's a constant process. So, stop putting, I free you up from putting all this pressure on yourself. One of the things I think to really consider is that experiments, I would give yourself like a number to that. You hear us say all the time, it's not 1 or 2 videos, it's more like 8 to 10. So I'll push back on a little something that you said earlier, Sam. You're like, well, maybe it's going to be your hook. And then maybe next time you do this. I would actually challenge that maybe you do several videos where your only focus is the hook.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. Like 5 to 10 thumbnail, then the next 5 to 10, hook, then the next 5 to 10.
You confuse yourself.
Yeah, just want to clarify that for the audience.
Definitely,
because once you're not going to learn enough, what can you tweak to even compete with yourself, right? And make it better.
Right.
From there. So let's go back to the first scenario. What are your thoughts there?
Creator is uploading way too many videos and are feeling the burnout. Mm-hmm. I would ask, are you okay with dialing back the amount of uploads that you're doing? And we can focus a little bit more of that effort and a little bit more of that time on running an experiment. And I probably would do something pretty similar. I probably would try to dial back some of our content, go into our analytics. And I guess there's a benefit if you have too much content because at least you have more data to work with. And so you can look in your analytics and see, again, what isn't working right now? Is there a particular area that we should really try to improve and let that kind of be our plane of attack moving forward? How can we kind of be strategic and set an experiment and really try to improve some of these particular dominoes to knock those over that will help us get unstuck? So that's where I would start. I
feel like you probably lost a couple people in the audience, and only because I can hear it now because I've worked with a lot of creators like this as well. Blake's nodding his head. He knows where I'm going.
Yeah.
But if I don't post as much, I'm not going to have the views, which means I'm not going to have the AdSense.
Yeah. And
so
my
what
thought,
do you do?
My thought for, especially again, going back to the story of the creator, my thought of what is the type of content you're creating? Is it content that you post and is dies after like a couple weeks, or is it content that's evergreen? Because if we're focused on making, news-based content for the sake of the scenario,
sure,
after a while, that will stop performing. But that's why you're on this constant cycle of pumping out more and more and more to keep up. What if we took an experiment and say, okay, well, we can still focus on that. Let's not pull away from what's working for you because obviously that tension's there for you. What if we thought about 1 video or 2 videos in terms of what is something that would be timeless, where I can post it and the lifespan could be more than a couple weeks, maybe a month, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Because that would then, in terms of their worries of the AdSense and the views, hopefully help alleviate that pressure a little bit, because that would help kind of carry that a little bit.
And that would have to be an experiment, right? Because that's a long-term play. That's not a, we're going to put something out and it's going to perform and that's it. It's going to die. That's something that will become evergreen content, right? Sam and I have worked with lots of clients like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of one in particular, right?
Yeah, I think it really is. And I do think I think it is a respectful thing to ask first, like, are you comfortable doing this? Because some people just won't be. And sure, there's probably other kind of planes of attack we could formulate with that. But most creators, I don't think I've ever had a creator say no when I suggest that. And usually what ends up happening is we post less content. Those videos go further. They're more evergreen. And it actually ends up being net less effort for them because they're no longer stuck on this hamster wheel that's going too fast and they're trying to keep up. And it's more, oh, I can actually just use a little more of my time and effort to just make less videos. It's the whole quality over quantity conversation. Yeah. A lot of times they end up earning more with AdSense as well once they've kind of established that rhythm.
So I feel like a next step in this conversation would be to really look at data, right? Because how do you evaluate that to show that? Because immediately I'm going to see probably a decline in my channel, just in this one particular scenario, because I don't have the number of videos, right? But how do you actually look at the data to see whether or not what you're doing is working?
I have a thought that's related to this, and then I have another thought that's not super related to this.
I'm intrigued.
So I think first, like Blake was saying, I would really try to think of those viewer signals and what analytics are tied to those. So if we're going to start with kind of like the title of thumbnail, maybe we look at our impressions, we look at our click-through rate. I'd really dig into our retention graph. Like what patterns are you seeing? You could be stuck in a rut because you do a call to action to subscribe and like the video and sell your ebook at the beginning of every single video. And you have this massive drop off and you've just been shooting yourself in the foot for the last however many months. And so there can be some little tweaks and some fixes like that you could do. Another thought that's maybe separate from this, as far as like maybe looking directly in your analytics, I'm thinking of the person who's made the same type of video for the last 7 years and they're in a rut and a decline. And for that person, I might suggest, what would version 2.0 look like? What would a different perspective on your type of video look like? How do we serve your target audience, fill your value proposition in a way that just looks slightly different? You know, for the creator who's been kind of that talking head style for however many years, what would it look like to shoot that in a different way? So that's not as directly tied to a specific analytic, but it's probably something you could pick up on. Like maybe your audience is just bored and maybe you're bored as a creator too. You know, how could we kind of reinvent ourselves too?
You know, funny enough, again, another story from another coach working with, like the creator. Same idea, was posting a lot of content and didn't want to slow down out of fear for a lot of similar reasons. And it wasn't until the coach decided to take, because he sent him screenshots of his retention graphs from some videos. It's like, cool. What would it look like if we took a pause? Because the retention graphs were really good, actually, pretty impressive. But there were a couple that were outliers in terms of like a really strong hook, and you could tell that a lot of them maybe a little flatter. It's like, what would it look like if we stopped and took a pause and said, what did we do well here, and learn from that, rather than trying to pump more and more out, but take a pause and notice, okay, this hook was really impressive compared to the rest of them. What did we say differently? What did we do differently? And for that creator, that changed everything for him. He's like, he bought into the idea completely of, okay, cool, I'm okay. This makes more sense. Now we can experiment because I'm seeing in the data the proof of that, right? So I feel like, again, it's running with blinders on, but having someone give you that piece to like take a step back and look at it from a aerial point of view.
Yeah, and I feel like, and it's hard because I feel the tension and the anxiety that every creator has when you post a video, because I've posted hundreds myself over the years, and you're just like so close to it you can't see it. But I've always, in the past several years, dropped a lot of that information, whether that's for myself, clients, this channel, into spreadsheets, and then never really analyzed the data too close until 30 or 90 days later. Because one of the things that I recognize is when you're evaluating it right away, that's just one story. But when you step back completely objectively, and that doesn't happen for me, I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't happen for me until about 30 days, till I can remove myself from the emotional attachment to a piece of content. I can look at that data with a totally fresh perspective. And that's where you really do start to see patterns. And I think that speaks a different story really to what's going on. And then from there, making evaluations of, okay, well, what did we do differently? Or what were those little ones? Taking notes along the way is always a great thing, because I guarantee you won't remember what you think you're going to remember 30 days later or 90 days later. But I get really, really excited when I start thinking about experimenting, whether it's my content, whether it's the channel's content, a client's content, because I love so much about what you guys are talking about looking at things from a fresh perspective. And I don't remember, I think it was Sam who said it, that, maybe the audience is getting bored. The creator is definitely getting probably bored. And that's why the audience feels bored.
Yeah.
Right? You're laughing because it's true.
Probably, yeah.
So when I think about experimenting, it can feel scary, but look at it as a good scary. When you were first making content, you had a passion. You wanted to, you had a voice. You wanted to say a particular thing. What's that fresh perspective for you? What's that new angle to something? And how can you get your viewer excited about this? And when you start thinking about it from that perspective, does that spark new ideas for you? Because I know usually when I do that, it does for me. So with all that, the excitement part about that will carry over into your content, right?
Yeah, I was going to say the viewer knows. The amount of videos from creators that I've seen where maybe they try something different and the top comments are like, I can just tell how excited you are making this content.
Totally.
Without them explicitly saying it. Like you can just feel it. It comes through on video. And so I think the same happens when you get so bored and you're kind of pigeonholed into a certain, or you feel like you're pigeonholed into a certain type of video. The audience feels it. That's probably why you're stagnating, because they're probably bored because you're bored and they're kind of dropping off. So, I agree. I get really excited by experimenting as well.
I think it's natural too, being a human. I think of any movie, series, video game, people get, naturally get bored very quick. They want something new. And you as a creator will also do the same thing. I think of, that came to mind was the Fast and Furious movies. I don't know how many movies of those there's been now.
Yeah.
But up to the point where I got bored of them, right? But it's the same idea as a creator. Like we're creating what works and we're so focused on that, we're not recognizing that people are kind of like, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the people who are acting the movies or those who are writing the movies are like, okay, I'm getting to a point where that's why TV shows end at some point. They get to a point where you've done all you can. Now you're bored. You want something new to kind of focus on. So it's a natural cycle, I think, in every aspect of our lives, and just being aware of that and being okay with the idea at some point, cool, let's try experiment something different and see what else you can become from that.
And I think of too, so much of the audience, they're business owners and entrepreneurs. And, whether you are on YouTube and that's really where your business is, or you're off YouTube and you have a more traditional business, your customer has a life to them too. So does your content. So I would challenge you to take Sam up on what does your channel look like 2.0. If you've been here and you've been doing that, it's no different. What's that new, fresh voice? Where does that new passion and excitement come from? And maybe you need a break from your channel and your content for a little bit to get that. That's okay too. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite recent YouTube updates is the fact that they brought back the sort by oldest. It's always fun. I don't know about you guys.
Today.
Yeah, it's so fun to me.
I had a plug-in to replicate that for the longest time, and it was useless.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
I was missing out.
You're holding out on us,
I know. What the heck?
It wasn't the greatest. It was super buggy. So when they swapped this back, I was like, oh, thank God, because this thing was useless.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I get so excited just to go look at other creators, their oldest videos, and especially when it's like super different. And I don't mean different like a totally different genre, but just like the way that they approach the content early on versus what it's evolved into is such a cool way to just see like how much you've grown as a creator.
Yeah.
Well, and that's that whole zoomed out perspective, right?
Right.
Really, when you think about it,
Yeah.
the beginning.
It's storytelling. It's character development over time. You know? Yeah.
Yep. And I feel like maybe this would be something to kind of tell the audience too, is we've been running an experiment of our sorts here on the channel. Yes,
breaking the fourth wall.
We are in the middle of it right now. Yeah, because even for us, we need to shake things up and we need to look at things from another perspective. Now, we have a fraction of the data that we would like, but I think that we should reveal that at some point. What do you guys think? There's
That
my
would be
hook.
interesting. Yeah.
Interesting.
I think
for
it would be. Yeah,
I
we will
was going to
talk.
make a joke and say Ingrid's going to start daily vlogging, and that's the experiment. But no, that's not
So
happening.
not gonna happen. So not gonna happen. And on that note, what are some other practical data tips that you can give the audience here?
Yeah.
Sam, I'll put you
Yeah.
on the spot
I'll say
here
it 'cause
just
I'm-
for that comment.
Yeah. Well, I've got an answer for you. I think because we did talk about go try to analyze and just see like what stands out
Yeah.
to you based on
What
those
does that
viewer
look
signals.
like?
What does it look like? And so maybe you do start running some experiments. Then what does it look like from there? How do I measure? Am I actually moving in the right direction or not? And if you haven't experimented with groups in your analytics, that can be really helpful. So like, let's say you plan an intentional experiment of, okay, I make one video a week, so 4 videos per month. We're going to say for the next 2 months, I'm going to run an experiment making the best titles and thumbnails I possibly can. And so that is our experiment we're running for the next 2 months. That gives us 8 videos. It's a kind of decent sample size. You might want a little bit more, but it depends. But let's say we do that. You get to your last video, let it breathe maybe for a little bit. And then you can make a group of just those 8 videos that were part of your experiment and then measure, okay, what do we see with our impressions and our click-through rate? And you can get really specific with just that group and then compare that to your other videos. So
And
it
just
gives
to be
you,
clear-
yeah, go ahead, Ingrid.
Just to be clear, you have to be on the advanced tab,
Yeah.
and up top you'll see your channel name. And if you click into there, that's where you would create a group.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
groups, if you haven't jumped into groups, they're super, super helpful because again, it helps you get just a bit more of that zoomed out perspective and more accurate numbers. Because if you do one video experimenting with something and it doesn't do super great, you can't just take that at face value and say like, oh, it doesn't work. The experiment didn't work.
I think to touch on that too, I think I try to tell creators too as we experiment, like don't be shocked if things don't perform the way we expect right away. Like we're breaking
Right.
patterns.
Yeah.
That's what experimentation
It's a good
is. Like,
point.
your audience doesn't know it's seeing something different they're not normally seeing. It's just we're putting something new out to see what is the data around this portion of the video. Same with I think Sam, you mentioned in the past too, working with a creator who was pivoting his channel too. Same idea.
Oh,
He
yeah.
saw it dip
Yeah.
for a little bit, and eventually it started to
Yep.
pick back up again to where he wanted it to be. But that was natural. It's part of the process. It's got to be a bit of death before there's life, right?
Right.
So when is enough and when is too little? Like Sam, you work like in the enterprise coaching area, right? In the
do.
action plan, you work one-on-one with creators, deep into their analytics. Like when you're making groups practically with your content creators,
Yep.
walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah. So normally I will make groups and compare it to like a similar sample size. So like, or a similar date range usually too. It kind of depends, but I try to get it as like apples to apples of a comparison as I can. Just to
Smart.
get a good idea of like, are we moving in the right direction? Because I think a lot of times you can go off of just subscribers gained or like just views and make all of your decisions for your channel just based on those things. And so sometimes maybe you have way better performing titles and thumbnails and you're not necessarily having much change with your subscribers just yet. But I would say some of those things tend to be more results down the road that will come from the hard work with some of the experiments you're running right now. So yeah, we usually will get pretty specific with what's the experiment we're running right now. Let's put those videos into a group, compare it to maybe the same amount of videos from last month before we ran this experiment, and then look at that particular metric and see, yeah, are we moving in the right direction or not?
And tossing your outliers out as well.
Yeah, because you may have maybe the first one you do is a stinker, and it's just we got the rep, and then and then maybe we had one that went really really far, and then
That gets tossed too.
yeah, that gets tossed too. Like we like to look at the median average, like of our
Yeah.
8 videos in this experiment. What's like in the middle average? That gives us a pretty healthy idea.
Yeah, and I think that this is a really powerful exercise that creators of all size can do, because I think that it's really important to only be really measuring. I mean, not only, but when you're looking to grow something and you're really trying to talk about an experiment, you have control over that in the moment. You don't have control over things that you've already produced in the past. So you can compare like last month to this month if both months are where you're experimenting, but comparing like your median average of this month to something you did a year ago where you weren't, that's not really helpful. Because you can't control that. So I think that's worth mentioning as well. So I'm curious, dangers of experimenting? I feel
Dangers.
like we need some sort of music there.
I know.
Julie will do that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a handful. I think what comes to mind for me is if you're just going like too hard, too fast. Like if you just don't give it time, I guess. You know, if you're going crazy with, all right, the next video, we're going to try this new thumbnail style. And then the one after that, we're going to try this new video structure style. And then the one after that, we're going to try more of a vlog style than like a talking head. You know, if it's just too much, too fast, you're going to confuse YouTube. You're going to confuse the algorithm. You're going to confuse your audience probably. And you're not really going to get much valuable data to really make some data-driven decisions.
Which is frustrating because so many of us are not very patient.
I know. It's hard. I can admit that. I think as a creator, it's hard to be patient with some of these things and like let it breathe. Because I mean, I'm a data guy. So even for me personally, I am like trying to rein myself back and not just be constantly going into my analytics and trying to make decisions. Yeah, exactly. So
what do you guys feel is like from a practical standpoint? Because we're talking about experiments, and I feel like some of this is a little, kind of like a theoretical conversation. So what does it practically look like in content? Like how many times would you experiment? Like if you wanted to improve your hook, let's say that's where you started. Okay. What does that experiment look like in execution?
As far as like, how are you going to improve your hook? I would actually recommend, if you're not studying other channels and watching a lot of content, that's one place to start. Sometimes it's really obvious if you look in your analytics, like, oh yeah, all of my hooks are 1.5 minutes long. Maybe I just need to like make it, or a giant hockey stick. Like maybe I just need to shorten it, and it's pretty plain and simple. But for someone else, I may recommend, if you're not watching a lot of content, go watch some creators that you enjoy and just be really curious. Like, why did I like this hook? Why did I keep watching? Why did I exit after 3 seconds? Ask some questions as you're watching. And then maybe for the ones you like,
that one and my own.
For the ones that you like, how can you repurpose that with your unique voice for your audience and your value proposition that fits, and try that.
So I kind of want to push against something here, because you said maybe if it's 1.5 minutes long, which is a very common problem that we do see, long hooks, maybe very not long. Necessarily that long, but 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That's a long hook. That's a long hook. 30 seconds or 45 seconds. And you know what? It happens to the best of us. I remember analyzing this channel for Tim 3 years ago. I don't think he's going to mind me telling this story. And after analyzing, months of content, the very first thing I said to him was, we need to shorten the hooks. I said, on average, you're 1 minute long.
Wow.
And he was just blown away. He had no idea. He had made thousands of videos.
And that's proof. That's proof when you're nose blind to it, you just don't see it, right?
Right. It just wasn't something that was top of mind.
Yeah.
So that was something that we worked on. But, just because you are all of a sudden shorter and you're having some success, don't stop there. I don't want you to stop there. And that's where I'm pushing back just a tiny bit here. Okay, so you went from, 45 seconds or a minute and a half, and now all of a sudden you're doing 10 seconds. But how is that performing? Are you at 30% loss, 40% loss, 20% loss, 25% loss? How can you tweak it for the next time? Is there a pattern over several? And would you guys recommend doing this if you're like, let's take the hook example. And you were also talking about doing too much and kind of maybe annoying the audience. But would you do that video after video after video? I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are here, because I actually have no idea what you guys are going to say on this one.
My initial mind goes to, I think hook-wise, I feel like you could try it in multiple videos at first. Depending on I think it depends on what you're implementing. If I'm going to try a new style of video or a new title and thumbnail, I'd seed it in there to my regular content. But I feel like hook wise, especially if I'm not seeing anything significant previously to that, why not try new hooks for the next 10 videos and see what it looks like? I think in that concept, but that's just my thoughts. I'm curious what you guys think.
Are you saying, like, if I just clarify the question, do you mean like trying different styles of hooks back to back to back to back, or?
Could be, yeah.
I would try to keep it as similar as possible. If we're aiming for like a 10-second hook, I would recommend try to get it close to 10 seconds for whatever the duration of this experiment is going to be, so that you have like a really consistent sample size. Because if it's vague and it's just, let's make shorter hooks for the next 8 minutes or the next 8 videos, some are 10 seconds, some are 30 seconds. Like, yeah, it may help, but I think the more specific you can get with some of these experiments, the better the results will be.
Yeah, and that's where my mom was going to, was like the idea of using the same hook 10 times in a row, or the same style, not necessarily different ones every single video, but
right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm kind of poking at here, I agree with everything that you guys are saying, is like, when we say don't experiment too much. So if you are doing, you're delivering your content, you're used to doing it a certain way, maybe you're getting a certain result, and then all of a sudden you do have a lot of B-roll, you have, or maybe you're doing vlogging style, and then all of a sudden you're going to change to just sitting on a bed and delivering a talking head because you want to tell a story. I wouldn't do that over and over and over again, back to back. But experimenting with a hook, looking different ways, that would be okay, back to back to back, because I feel like these little nuances sometimes trip creators up. And I feel like if you were to drastically change your content and then just do that for 10 times in a row, that would be too jarring for the audience. What do you guys think?
Totally agree.
100%. Yeah.
I think if you're able to condense it to step by step, one thing at a time, I think it's more helpful. And I would imagine some pushback that I would get from a creator probably would be, it's just going to take so long. Like, it's going to take so long to do that. Yeah. And then I think, we really kind of keep coming back to, like, it's a marathon, it's really, we're looking at the long haul here. And so it's just not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. Most channels that truly experiment, it's months in the making.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just know that.
I've seen it a couple of times where people have done a 180 on their channel and it's succeeded, but that's very rare occurrences. And there could be other factors within that too, depending on if it's just like, an authority in a space, like a well-known creator, that sort of thing too. But there are outliers and exceptions, but in terms of, creators that we want, we're working with and that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely taking some time to let it breathe. And experiment that way.
And I don't want the tone to be like, it's going to take a while, like this negative sort of thing. I think, if anything, I hope that gives encouragement to maybe a creator who's been like throwing spaghetti at the wall with kind of an aimless direction for a while, and like just hoping I'm stagnant and I don't know why, and I'm hoping I'm going to grow, but nothing's working. Hopefully this kind of gives like a blueprint or like a structure to follow of, I could experiment with this, and here's my starting place. And then from here, for the next couple months, I have some direction to like actually have a plan to try to get this thing better.
Cool. I'm curious, any other additional thoughts that you might have around experiments?
Do it. Experimenting is great.
Because like one of the things that I'm coming up against is, how do you know what the sweet spot is? And how do you know when you've done enough?
My initial answer is like when you start seeing the results, whether that be good or bad. Is it making sense? Is this worth pursuing, or should I take a pause and rethink where I'm going? And like that's after you've given it enough time, but you might start seeing the results you're looking for. Cool, then that's enough. Maybe on the hooks right now, let's try focusing on the click-through rate for a change. So gauging when you think you'd be satisfied right now to be able to move on to something else.
Yeah, sometimes you're in a rut and we don't even realize it. Experimenting is a natural part of growth. I challenge you to dive into your analytics, make groups. I want you to be able to answer the question, are you growing or are you just existing on YouTube?
Every week, we love to leave you with a power tip, something new that YouTube is doing on the platform. And speaking of experimentation, YouTube is experimenting in the coming weeks or in the future with live streaming on Shorts, vertical live streaming, something I think is blowing up a lot. Even I see on TikTok, and I'm fascinated to see this come to the Shorts platform. I'm not sure about you guys, what you think.
I'm excited about that. I think that'll be a game changer for Shorts.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
I think in a way to engage with somebody community-wise in the Shorts feed is something that I think we're missing, and that's a really great place to kind of put that. So
I was just thinking, because it's such a discoverable thing, but we don't see a lot of people convert to subscribers or part of the community. So that's super interesting.
I love it because it feels like an easier lift than a live.
Definitely, yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's exciting. Huh. Good power tip, Blake.
Nice.
Thanks for watching another Video Creators Podcast. We'll see you next week. Bye.